Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. This is Blackheart 6. Here we go again. We're going to continue on with our video series of creating a scenario for beginners. So let's jump right into it. We have our Arma Reforger tools. We open that up. We now have two icons in here available to us. We have the scenario creation tutorial, which is the scenario that we are creating, and then we have the Arma Reforger, which is the game, and we covered why we need that in there. We now can look at the gear wheel. So if you go up to gear wheel, show options, and say list, you click on that. It just changes the view in here to a list view, but it does show the path to where the modification is at, or the scenario is at. I normally just use grid. Okay. Also, now if you highlight your tutorial or your scenario and you right click on it, you will have 6 options here that you can use. We're going to start at the bottom. So if you want to remove from the list, so if you want to remove this from the project launcher, your scenario, you just click on remove from list and it will remove it from the list. If you want to permanently delete the project, I suggest you go to show an explorer first. It'll take you there, open up an explorer window. You can back up one and then delete your folder right here, okay, and then go back and remove from list. It just eliminates you having to go find your project in the explorer. This will permanently delete it. Okay. The next 2 options from there is set thumbnail and clear thumbnail. To set a thumbnail, so if you want a nice graphic like you see here with the Arma Reforger, you can set a thumbnail on your project. And this thumbnail has to be a .png file or ping. The size of it, I don't know if there's a size restriction. You can use anything like 1024, 512. Obviously, the resolution is going to matter and how pretty the thumbnail is. So I have a ping file right here. Let's see. Yeah, it's a ping. Yep. So we have a ping file right here. We're going to use. I'm going to highlight that, and you can see it puts a nice little icon up there or image thumbnail on my project, so it helps easier to identify things. If you want to remove it, you can go ahead and just hit clear thumbnail, and it'll take it away. Okay, so let's go ahead and add it back, though. I like that look. So we'll leave that on there. The next 2 options up here is open and open with add-ons. Okay, open with add-ons. You can use open with add-ons to temporarily open your scenario with another add-on. Okay, so if I select open with add-ons, as you can see here is a list of the scenarios or mods or add-ons that I created myself. They're all unlocked. So if I want to add the M252 mortar backpack, I can check that box and say open, and it will open the resource manager, and as you can see, there's now a folder in here with my add-on added to the scenario. Okay, and if we close this and we go back and I click on open, not open with add-ons, I click open, that add-on is not present. It's a temporary measure to add an add-on or a mod to your scenario. So if you wanted to temporarily add RHS status quo, you could add it to the project launcher and then add it to yours, and it would be present. Now, we'll get more into adding mods and customizing your scenario at a later date. I just wanted to go over that feature for you because it's part of the project launcher, and that's what we're talking about right now is these options right here. Okay, so to temporarily add an add-on, use open with add-ons. If not, just open your project. Okay, so we got the resource browser open. The next thing you want to do is once you get into your creation here in the resource manager, you hit the world editor, and we want to go to load world. You can load the world from the file load, or Control O, or you can hit it here. And there's our world. So we're going to open it. And then once again, we have this default layer here, and it's highlighted. That's because it's the active layer right now. All right, so to get going on creating your scenario, all right, and being able to do meaningful things to it, before you add anything else to this, you need to determine, hopefully at this point you should already know in your head what kind of game or scenario you want to create. There's several different types of game modes. There's the conflict game mode, which is actually called campaign. There's game master game mode, which is actually called editor. There's the scenario framework game mode, which is used in combat operations. There is a custom game mode called game mode plain, which you can make your own game mode completely from scratch. There's game mode free for all kinds of different game modes. There's some team death matches and deathmatch game modes. So you really need to know before you get to this point what kind of game mode you want to play. Now, if you're making a PvP game mode, you're going to look at game mode _ campaign. If you're making a PvE, you want to use the scenario framework to do that because there's more tools in there for you to create a game mode. You can make a PvE using campaign, but it's just not developed for that. It wasn't designed for that purpose. It was designed for a PvP. If you want to make a game master game mode where you start your scenario and it's only the game master, well then you wouldn't use game mode campaign for that. It wouldn't make any sense to do that. Okay, so to show you the different types of game modes, you can go down to your resource browser, type in game mode, if you can type, and what it will do is it'll start to filter out things. Okay, so here we have in our window, all right, and here we can change this. Once again, there's some options here. We can change it to grid view, or we can change it to list view. So as you can see, there's a list of files, and anything with game mode in it will appear in this list. Now, here's a .conf file. This is just FYI stuff for you. If you hover over it, it tells you it's a config file. And if you hover over the next file down, it's a script file. And these are all locked, so they're read-only. And then a .et file is a entity prefab file. Okay, these are the ones that we're going to be mostly using in our scenario. So if we go game mode, type space .et, it filters everything out except for the ET files, which we now have a list of game modes that are available to us. So as you can see, there's game mode SF single player, SF, team deathmatch, plain. This is the customized one I was talking about. These game mode editors and editor full, this is game master. So when you see something about editor, editor full, building editor, these are the different editors, kind of like the mission editor in Arma 3 that takes you into a special mode into the game. Then we have team regular deathmatch game mode, capture and hold game mode. Here is the conflict game mode, which is actually called campaign. And then we have game mode base. Do not use anything, or don't use _base for the most part. So if you see a vehicle or a character or game mode, try to stay away from using these bases and editing those, because they are the base of everything. It's like the root, and you really don't want to use those. So this is a list of the game modes, and that's how you find them. Now, there are also things called managers. So if we go into managers or manager and we filter those out, let's go manager.et. Okay, you can see that there's a lot of managers. Okay, and so how do you know which ones to add? Well, you can guess which ones to add, or you can look at a previous game mode that was already created by opening it. So let's go to load world. You can go up to Arma Reforger, and we can pick one of these games. Now, if we go to multiplayer, let's look at Combat Ops Ireland and see what they did. So we can go here. We can open up Combat Ops Ireland, and then if we filter and say Manager in the hierarchy, we can see what managers they used. Now these are for the world, but here is the Combat Ops Ireland, and we can see they used these 6 managers right here. Okay, so that's one way to determine what managers you need. There's also another way to do this that is more efficient. So let's go back to our world. So we're going load world. They have a plugin that is called the Game Mode Setup. So you go to the Game Mode Setup plugin, select that, and then this is a step-by-step setup of the game mode, and it's going to give you all the managers and files that you need to get your scenario up and running. Now, in here, you see it says template. If you go to the 2 dots, it says browse. So if you click those 2 dots, it will take you automatically to the directory of which template to select. And this conflict is campaign, of course, game master, and scenario framework. Anything outside of that, you're going to have to manually create yourself. So fortunately for us, there is a scenario framework.config, so we can say OK to that. And it will select it and put the template in there. Hit next. And what it will do is it's going to scan our world to see if there's anything present. So you hit scan world. And it comes up with a list, and it says, okay, I've scanned the world. Here are the missing entities. You want to add these, so hit next. And then it says, okay, do you want to create them? Yes, we want to create them. All right. And so as you can see, it put a total of 8 entities over here into our default layer. Okay. Now, this here is telling us that there could be some more entities missing. So if you want to rescan, you can rescan here. And that some of these entities are going to be manually configured. And of course, we'll go over all those and show you how I do it for my scenario. Okay, so if we hit rescan, it's not going to show anything. You know, it should come back clean because all these worlds are here. And so, yep, it did. Okay, now we've rescanned, so it's taking us on to the next page in this plugin, and it says for the game mode to appear in the main menu scenario list, it needs a mission header. Okay, so in the game, you go down to scenarios and you see the list of scenarios. Those are all based on this mission header, so we can automatically create it here, or we can skip it and add it later. We're going to go ahead and create the header at this point. Okay, and we're going to hit create header, and it's going to come up with this little thing and say script optimization. Of course, say yes to all because this is all internal. So now it says the mission header config at this location is configured correctly. Okay, so it's created that. Wish they'd make that wide enough. So hit next. It says, congratulations, the game mode is configured correctly. Give it a try and hit that play button. Don't do that, okay? Don't hit the play button at this point. You're not even close to being able to use this yet. So hit close, all right? And what you see here is it took us back to the resource browser, okay? And here is the mission header that it created, mission header combat ops, and there's some information in here. We do not need this mission header at all at this point. We only need it when we get ready to publish. So we're going to go ahead and just close this file out. All right, and as you can see, this is your quick launch behind it. We're going to go back to our world editor, and now we have a list. We have our 8 entities here of all the entities that are required to utilize game mode scenario framework. Okay, now there's a couple in here that we're going to remove and replace, and then there's one in here that we're going to set up particularly for the Arlen Island. So, and this is called the AI world, and you have to set some nav mesh components, and we're going to get into all that. Okay, right now we have a layer in here called default. What we want to do though is we can either rename this layer or we can create a new layer. So we're going to go up here and we're going to create a layer, and I'm going to call it Z_managers. You don't have to do this. You can leave everything in default if you want, but this is what I do, and this is how I normally work while I'm creating a scenario. And I put Z in front of that manager so it appears at the bottom of the list all the time. And of course, it's not highlighted now, so it's not default. So, or it's not the active layer, sorry. So if we double click on that, Z managers, it becomes the active layer versus the default. And then in the default, we can go ahead and delete that if we wanted to, or rename it, or do something else with it. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit. So our managers are over here. We really don't care about the location of them. They can be anywhere in the world, present, just as long as we have them. Okay, so we're going to save at this point. And if you notice, nothing is highlighted green now, okay, because we have our active layer here, but we don't have any components in it. So if you go up to your entity select filter, and right now we have it set on all layers. If we go to here and click on this, sorry, can't do that. If we go up here and we say select from inactive layers only, we select that, then we can highlight things here. You can't manipulate them because they're in a locked layer, okay? But notice that the buildings are all, highlightable. So, and it will take you to those, you click on it, it'll move you to that area. And that's in the default layer. Okay, so if we go back up here and say, all right, select from all layers, okay, we select that. These are still selectable. You can highlight them and drive to them, okay, but you really don't want that, because if you're building your scenario and you just click on one of these, it will take you to this directory, which contains hundreds, thousands of components in it. As you can see, the list is quite long. Okay, so we don't want that. All right, what you want to do is go up here and say select from active layer only. So you click that, and now nothing is selectable except for what's in this area. Okay. Another thing you're going to find is, especially with these smaller maps, right? If you drive around, you see this yellow boundary. If you go outside that yellow boundary, it kind of slows the camera down and it makes it difficult to get back in. It takes some time. So what you can do is highlight an entity and then press the F key, and it will move the camera to that position. So we hit F and it takes us right there. Okay, so that is the manager set that we need for this. Now there's some work. Let's see, what time are we at? 18 minutes, beautiful. All right, so now the managers, it said, well, hit play and you're good to go, but that's not going to be the case. We're going to go ahead and hit play. So we want to, on your play button up here, you have some options. You can play from inside the viewport, or you can play full screen. We're going to change this to play from viewport so we can kind of look at these other files at the same time. You can't manipulate them, but you can be able to see things going on. You can also click on your log console tab down here and watch the messages go by and see things happening as you go into your viewport. That's another advantage of that. Okay. Here it says play from camera position and use the game camera position at return. Okay, so you can uncheck that. When we return back out, it won't be at that game camera position. It will be, I think, back to the original position. We'll see. We'll test that out. Play from camera position, if you check that, then wherever the camera is at, you can play. Okay, so if we go here and we launch into this, all right, it's going to start us with a character from this position. Now, the important thing to know right here is you are not assigned a faction when you play from camera position. So we are not going to be able to get the full effect of what we're trying to build in our scenario if you play from camera position. You can test things quickly, but anything related to factions will not be displayed. So tasks and loadouts and stuff like that. So just be aware of that. Use play from camera position to troubleshoot and quickly test things, but just understand that there's no faction related stuff going to be displayed. And if you hit escape, it takes you back into your world editor and brings you back into the editor at that point. All right. If we go uncheck play from camera position, okay, and we hit play, all right, this is what you're going to get. You're going to be launched into the water, okay, and you're not going to be able to do anything, all right, and that's because we're not fully set up yet. And so when it tells you to hit play during the game mode plugin setup, say go ahead, you're good to go. No, this is what you're going to get, and so you're not. All right, so hit escape, switch back to edit mode, and we're going to go ahead and finish setting up these game modes and managers, and we'll get a spawn point down, so we'll be able to spawn in the world, and then we'll call it good. All right, so the faction manager. This here, I'm going to get rid of this comment. We don't need it. The faction manager, of course, manages the factions. And right now, this faction manager that is default for the game mode setup is using the US and USSR factions. Okay, I don't use this faction manager. I use a different faction manager. Okay, and I'll show you why. So this faction manager has two factions in it. Go over here. It has the US faction and the USSR faction. And that's it. So we're not going to get into the setup of this just yet. I just want to point that out, that this only has two factions. Okay. So I normally delete this faction and I go to my resource browser. Okay. I type in faction manager. .et, I filter, and then I have these faction managers come up. I normally pick faction manager editor. So if I take that and drag and drop it in the world, you will notice now I have 4 factions. I have all the factions available to me, okay, for manipulation and using, okay. So these have to be present. So we've got, US, USSR, FIA, and the civilian faction. So this is the better of the faction managers to use because it gives you all the factions. You can create your own custom faction manager if you want to, but I recommend you just use the editor one. It gives you all the factions available. Of course, there's a faction manager for free-for-all. It's set up a little differently. Here's the US underscore USSR, and then there's a campaign faction manager. For creating a multiplayer scenario framework, PvE scenario, you can use the faction manager editor, okay, and then you'll have all the factions available, okay. The next thing is you got loadout manager underscore US by USSR. If you're creating a conflict or campaign game mode, then you have the 2 loadouts because you're going to have player versus player. So both loadouts you want, obviously not to be against US versus US. You want US versus USSR, and you want those guys to have access to the equipment. So as you can see here, the loadout manager, here are the player loadouts available to the player, and that's where these come from. But I don't use that in PvE because you're not playing against another player, so there's no other loadouts that need to be available. So I delete that loadout manager, and then once again we type in loadout and hit that, and you will see that there are several loadouts available, pretty much aligned with what was in the faction manager. So, but I don't use the loadout manager underscore editor, okay? Because if you take that and drag and drop it, you can see here's all the pre-built loadouts, okay? Which, you know, is civilian, arsenal, new arsenal, U.S. rifleman, USSR rifleman. So this one doesn't really work for us either. What we want is more control. So you delete that loadout manager, and what you want to do is you can take this loadout manager base and drag and drop it, or we can create a duplicate of this and then call it what we want to, and then utilize it. And so what we want to do, because remember I said you really shouldn't use the underscore base items. So you right click on this, and you will have an option up here to override, duplicate, or inherit. Okay, well, I'm not going to get into the details on these, but each one of these act differently. An override is basically, it creates a copy of that add-on that will override this original file. Okay, so it's a one-for-one. Okay, if you go down to duplicate, it creates a duplicate, but it allows you to rename it. And so if you duplicate it, but give it the same name, it kind of acts like an override, but it doesn't. Okay, don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this. And then it creates an inherited file. Basically, when you inherit something, if there's changes to the base file, it will inherit those changes to your file. So not very clear on that because I don't really use it a lot. So what I recommend you do is you go to duplicate, create a duplicate, and you can see it says, okay, base or loadout manager underscore base. Now what we're going to do is we're going to give it our own name. So we're going to call this loadout manager, and we're going to say Blackheart 6. Okay, so we're going to give it a 3-letter tag on the back. Now let's do something different here. We're going to call it loadout manager US. Okay, there's no loadout manager called that, so we're going to call it that. And as you can see, when I clicked on that, it took us to the scenario framework, and here's our manager now. Okay, so we can take that manager and drag and drop it in the world, and it brings it up here, and there's no loadouts in here. We will have to create those player loadouts. Okay, what time are we at? All right, 2 minutes. Okay, that's very good. So what we'll do is we will create these loadouts in our next video. We'll get more detail on that loadout manager. The next thing that you want to do, so we have faction and loadout. You want to go to your SCR AI world. Okay, and this SCR underscore AI world is what gives your AI the ability to move around in the world. Okay, without this, they don't know where any of the roads are. They don't know where the buildings are, the trees, any objects that are placed in the world. They're totally blind. And if you don't set this up right, you will notice they walk backwards. And what they do is they walk backwards towards the 0, 0, 0 point of the world. That's the only thing they know. So you have to set this up. There are 3 components in the object properties that require you to set up. One is called nav. They're all called nav mesh world component, but each one is different. So what you do is you highlight, and we're going to filter out so we can concentrate on those. So I just typed in the filter nav, and it filters these out. You go to the top nav mesh world component, and you go down here to where it says nav mesh settings, nav mesh files config. Okay, and it says set class. The one thing you want to look at is what kind of project is this nav mesh. So you go down to nav mesh project, and it says soldiers. you have 4 choices in here. You have none, BTR like, soldiers, and low res. You don't change it, you leave it on soldiers, but this tells you what nav mesh to put in here. So you click on set class, and it creates a thing called nav mesh field, and it puts a field in there called nav mesh file, and then another field called nav mesh file override. Okay, we're only concerned with the nav mesh file, and it gives you the 2 dots, which is the browse. So you click on those 2 dots, and then you go in here and you type in NMN. And what that will do is filter everything out except for the nav mesh files that are required. Now, there are several, as you can see, there's numerous nav mesh files in here, and you've got to know which one to pick. All right, well, it can tell you it's none of these down here in the SP. Scenario Framework, nope, that's got to deal with another island. So we have up here multiplayer nav meshes, and you have one for Co-op Combat Ops Arland, Combat Ops Eden, anything Eden, Montanak, Western Evron, you don't want to use because that's for a different island. It wouldn't work. You might get away with using Combat Ops Arland, but I'm going to tell you right now, unless you do something special with this map, this world, then you don't need to use Combat Ops Arland. The nav mesh that is the one that you really want to use in this situation is going to be GM Arland, and because GM Arland is a clean map with no obstacles laid on the roads, no objects in there, so it's just going to be basically what we see in this map. So select GM Arland, and it will populate that in there. And then the next thing you want to do is you can save at this point. Remember, save a lot because software crashes. Go to the second nav mesh world down, and you'll have the same thing. File, click on Arma Reforger, November Mike November, and then the next one you want to select is the GM _ Arland _ vehicles. And the reason you want to pick this one is because down here in the nav mesh project, you can see it says BTR like. Okay, so that means it's a vehicle. All right, so you want to use the nav mesh for vehicles for this component. Select that. And then the last one, you go down to nav mesh world component, and it says nav mesh project low res. So here you browse again, NMN, and you want to find the low res nav mesh. And this one is located down in multiplayer nav meshes down at the bottom. There's 2 low res. So if you filter low res, it will give you these 2 files here. Now this is for something, Western and Montanak. You don't want to use those. So you want low res Arland. So there you go. That's the nav mesh is now set up. Okay, we're good to go there. And we're going to run a little longer, but that's okay because I want to get this next item down so we can spawn in and show you that. All right. Now I'll tell you what, we're going to finish here. So we have our managers set up almost. Okay, there's some work we need to do in the game mode, but I think this is a better spot to stop at. And then when we come back in, we'll be able to get our game mode set up, talk about that, and get a spawn point down where we can spawn into the world properly without using play for camera. Okay? Appreciate it. Thank you. You all have a great day. Stay tuned.